Welcome to Behind the Teams. I'm your host, Nicole Howe. My career has been defined by a search for what separates a good from great. I've looked at this from the court as a professional athlete, through the lens of psychology throughout my studies, and now from the inside of product and design recruitment. On this show, we sit down with leaders to find out how they approach leadership. We dig into their stories, behaviours, and beliefs about what defines success and how to help their team perform at their best. Today, we welcome Darren Smith, a product design leader with over 20 years of experience, currently the Senior Director of Product Design with Multiplier. In this conversation, Darren and I dig into some big questions facing design leadership. Is the function broken, or is it just set up to fail? We talked about the difference between little d and big D in design, and why a mandate matters just as much as capability. If you're a design leader or thinking about stepping into that position, or just curious about where the discipline is going, I think you'll get a lot out of this one. Let's dive in. Right. Darren Smith, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. Before we dive in, I'm excited to dive straight in, but do you want to just give the listeners a bit of an overview? Who's Darren?
Yeah, sure. Who's Darren? I'm a digital product.
How long have we got?
Yeah, I forget most of the time. But I'm a product design leader. I've been doing this job for about 20 years in a variety of different industries, different geographies. I've delivered outcomes at scale for companies like Adobe, Atlassian, and Expedia. And now I'm working in global payroll for a startup called Multiplier.
Nice.
Multiplier is a global exchange for work, empowering companies to onboard, hire, and manage employees across 150 companies. So it's similar kind of scale that I've been working at before, but obviously much newer company.
Yeah. And I think, so I wanted to also dive in to talk about design leadership. So I think it's interesting that obviously you've been in different types of environments and you can kind of lend your experience from those different spaces and how they kind of maybe are the same or different. And we'll just dive straight in. It's a bit of a big question, but I'm curious to know from your perspective, is design leadership broken? Or do you think it's unsupported?
I don't think it's broken. I think it's often inserted into systems that aren't ready for it or designed for it to succeed. And sometimes I don't think the right people are inserted into those systems to help make the change that's required. And what I constantly see in organization is hiring senior leaders, but not changing how decisions get made. So you see a trend, and I talk about this quite openly, where I see super ICs hired to lead and scale design teams, and it's really putting a square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that is also the ceiling can be shaped by who design reports to. It can be a very low ceiling environment when you report to a function that doesn't understand design. I've seen this a few times when leadership see design as purely a UI or delivery function. Your ceiling's set, right? So you're coming in and you're working in a very low ceiling. You're optimizing for output and delivery within a system that's already set. And that's really hard to change. And I think it compounds the problem where people who aren't necessarily qualified to know how design can fix their organization hire people who can do the thing that they recognize, like have worked in an industry before, has domain expertise, and then expect them to make changes that they can't make because the ceiling's already set. It's a difficult situation.
Do you think, because I would agree, like I think if there's a mismatch between what an organization thinks or wants their design leadership to do versus in actual kind of reality what that person can do, you're going to get friction in there. But do you find, and this is my personal experience, like if someone's hiring for a design leadership role and I speak to them, what is it that you want? I feel like they can describe that kind of leadership or leader that is going to be more strategic, that is going to have a big impact on how building up that capability, that discipline. So it sounds like, okay, we're on the right track here. Then when I speak to leaders that are kind of in that space, it's a bit of a different reality. Do you feel like where is that mismatch? Because you're sort of saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's, if the ceiling's already set, it's going to be really difficult for a person to step in there and have the potential that they're capable of. But sometimes I feel like everyone kind of sees the capability, but then there's something that's just not working. Does it make sense, sort of what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, look, I think it's expectation times capability times mandate. And that's the math formula for this to work, right? Because any of those things that slip, you're struggling straight away. So
yeah,
I've had a really interesting year or so where expectation and mandate weren't there, and I thought they were. And that's a really bad mismatched journey for me. But joining Multiplier, I've been very careful to make sure expectation, capability, and mandate are there. Spending a lot of time working with the founders during my hiring loop to make sure they actually understood that I wasn't coming in to be the fastest Figma in the West, but my job was to build the system for clarity. And where it gets interesting is it's a bit of a weird role, design leadership, because in my mind, I'm building the system that enables better design. I'm not building better components in Figma, right? And I think that's generally what's misunderstood about design. And I call it little d design. Little d design is where we're shipping pixels and people think you're there to make something look great. AI is coming for our lunch in that world. You know, design leaders, if you're placing your meaning and purpose there, capability is where we can stretch capital D design and show like we can actually move upstream. We can fix systemic problems. We can make sure we're solving things from a systems perspective that are scalable and stop rework. Often what happens is design come in as like, yeah, you know, you can make the system better, but this thing just has to go out. And then let's just do it really quickly. By the way, we just need half a designer on this for a day. Engineering are already waiting. And then you get in these loops of rework because it hasn't been set up to be successful. You miss a bunch of use cases and then everyone's screaming at the 11th hour, and it's an ugly position to be in. So trying to come in and make sure like you're aligning expectation, capability, and mandate is really important. And it's just reminding people constantly that, okay, that's little d design. Let's make sure we're acknowledging what you're talking about. You're actually talking about changing the system. It means this. It means more capability, more resources, more time.
Is your stance that every organization will benefit from that, from having big D, like design, like thinking? Or is there still a place for that little d design? Do some organizations really need that? Can leaders step into that space and still be really effective because that's what is needed?
If you asked me 5 years ago, I'd say 100%. But now, guys, if you're not doing it, AI is going to take your jobs. If your whole meaning and purpose is little d design, polishing pixels, it's not there now, but I can see a world in the not too distant future where our role will just be supporting outcomes there. Where I'm working closely with my CTO at the moment at Multiplier is, what does design mean as you move more upstream, where AI is supplementing a lot of these outcomes, right? At the moment, thinking systems, co-creating PRDs, doing discovery research, thinking about how something is scalable, thinking about it's cohesive, that's where big capital D design is needed. Figma Make, Claude Design, you know, that world is going to take over soon. So I would say right now, if you're operating in a little d design capability, think about moving upstream.
Is there any kind of advice you can give someone that is feeling like they're in that position?
Say a little bit more.
Do you think that if, let's say there's a leader out there listening that feels like, okay, yeah, I am operating more of that little d position. I don't know whether it's, and this is me speaking hypothetically as that person, I don't know whether it's something I'm doing, or is it the environment, is it structural that I'm not able to move more upstream? What can I do to figure out what is the actual barrier here? And then start to move the influence or move your ability to kind of have the right conversations with the right people. How can you start to get further upstream?
Yeah, look, I think design's great superpower is empathy, right? Being in a position where you're listening to multiple sources and insights. If you don't do it, do a listening tour. Listen to your stakeholders, listen to your partners, understand what their problems are, that their frustrations are. And I think when design are in listening mode, we can figure out where to position ourselves. You know, it's easy to talk about the problems, but it's what people are looking for is not just identifying the problems, but finding solutions as well. So listen to your stakeholders, listen to the challenges they're having, listen to where work isn't quite landing, where, you know, you're seeing repeatable examples of where lowercase d isn't solving the problems. Maybe it's churn, attaching it to business metrics. Use the metrics of the business talk as a way to help give you the leverage that you need.
Do you feel, if we're talking about design's potential and solving that problem, that you're kind of, I'm assuming that you're kind of saying it is a bit of kind of industry-wide challenge that we're having at the moment. Do you think the responsibility does fall on design leadership to help bridge that gap? Do you think it needs support from, you know, people across the organization? What's your sense on that?
Yeah, I gave this some thought. I knew we were going to talk about this. I think it's shared responsibility, right? But it's not equal. There's a gap between design's potential and its reality, and it usually means the system and leadership capability aren't fully aligned. It is a design problem, it's a business problem, and it's a leadership problem. So it goes back to those three: expectation, capability, mandate again. Organizations have to create the right conditions for design to operate upstream. It means bringing design into problem definition, not just solutioning. So, going back to your previous question, if people find themselves constantly at the end of a process where work is thrown over the wall to them and they're not able to shape it as they would like, be more proactive. Look for where those decisions are being made. What rooms are you not in that you can just walk in and plonk yourself down? Don't wait to be invited. Everyone talks about the proverbial seat at the table. If you're not invited, pull up a chair. Find out how you can support your partners and show the value that you're there to bring, right? Then I think it's like clarifying decision rights. So influence isn't informal or really fragile. So it's important that you're not just supporting things upstream, but you are a DRI in a certain situation, or that's directly responsible individual for those who haven't worked at Meta. And I haven't. And it's like being super clear about who's driving certain roles and responsibilities and what the outcome will be of those things. So aligning incentives around outcomes, not just delivering UI, is really important.
On that point then, do you think that it's going to become more and more of a challenge with kind of the state of industry, with AI, with role clarity kind of blurring a little bit between product design, engineering even? That kind of understanding where design's impact is going to be and how to show the outcomes, being able to say, I own that, I think is already a challenge. And I think it's going to continue to be a challenge. Do you agree?
100%.
How do you think we navigate that?
It feels like at the moment with AI, there's this unnatural pressure and competition, right? PMs are blurring into design space, designer being asked to code or be quasi-PMs. Yeah, it's a very difficult position. I found like the best way of talking is figuring this out as relationships. But Multiplier have been super fortunate to have some amazing tribe leaders and a supportive CTO where we have open, gnarly conversations about this stuff and get super clear about what issues we're having, talk about our crafts, where the issues are, and then just come together to figure out like, what can we do as a group? Because we are ultimately an EPD, but as you said, everything's blurring at the moment. I think everyone's very nervous about the future as well, because you can see a future where certain roles collapse, dominant roles will rise, and different organizations do different things, right? An ex-colleague who's running a startup in America where they don't have PMs, and he talks about it openly on LinkedIn and he gets a bit of flack, but they see that design and engineering working closer together. You don't need that. I know there's a popular design research tool in Australia that doesn't necessarily have the PM role, but then I can see the other way, right? Where PMs are overtaking design and design are feeling that crunch right now. So yeah, it's a very difficult position, and it does come down to that perception and whose voice is the loudest to some extent. I was shared a Twitter article the other day that someone talking about, hey, design is AI's first casualty. And I was asked to respond to it. And my first reply is, be careful of fake news on the internet. If you're going to get your news from uncredible sources, like beware. It comes down to the expectation, right? And I do find in the States, design is a different shape, right? I'm a Brit. I've lived in APAC and I've worked in America a couple of times. And geography shape design, right? Because it's where talent comes from. So in America, you get very strong interaction and visual design, but there's a I don't know if it's unwillingness or an unwritten rule that design don't lean far into the left.
In the US, you mean?
In the US, yeah. So the expectation there is neat and tidy PRD, packaged up, thrown over the wall, design color in, move on. And I'm being a little bit unfair there, and I'm, dialing it up for effect, but it's true. I've seen it firsthand. And to some extent, we're not welcome in that left space. Whereas in APAC, because where talent comes from, Frog and Fjord, I worked at Atlassian, that's expected, right? Designers are coming in with a point of view, and it's expected to make the work better. Where you are pushing, it's healthy tension. You're working together to make a better outcome. So yeah, like it does change. So If people's perception is that design is UI, then I think at the moment, like, it's very worrying for
Mm.
a craft because AI is coming for our lunch.
Do you think there's been enough done to help people outside of, because I think there's a lot of disagreement even within the broad umbrella of design about what you're talking about there, big D versus little d. Where's the actual value as a designer? Kind of who are you and where do you fit into that? Do you think people outside of design, because there's so much variance within design, get a bit confused
Yeah,
from the
100%.
outside?
We all come from
How?
very different backgrounds, right? If you can
Yeah.
speak to even some of your previous panelists, like Maddie Schreck, Sarah, like, we all come from very different backgrounds. Some people come from more academia. Some people come
Mm.
from just being really good at design. And like I
Yeah.
was saying, you see that show up from a geography point of view as well. I've seen some amazing past team members in my group who are now leading large design functions. I'm not sure if they were the right people, but good on them. But we all come from very different backgrounds. And I think because of that, people are confused. It's like, well, hang on, I worked with someone before and they spent a lot of time working on components and they did just accept a PRD without any tension or any questioning. I'm a bit confused why you're trying to reset and go back to the research phase, right? So yeah, we don't make it easy on ourselves.
Yeah. I remember when I started recruiting in this space, and there were so many lovely, generous people. And I think in design, you always find, those types of people. Gave me their time, tried to help me understand what it was. And honestly, it took me so long. Like, I've been in it coming up 5 years now. I still learn things every day. But I think to myself, it is so challenging, I think, from the outside to really understand what design is. But if an organization gets it and if the stakeholders get it, obviously you get really great impact. But I personally think that that is such a challenge, because we talk all the time about, design leaders having to speak the language of business and try to make sure that you're showing the value in that way so other people get it. But I think it's so much harder in reality.
And
So much harder.
I don't have a great solution.
Yeah.
It really comes down to those three things: expectation, capability, mandate. Understand that when you're entering an organization, know what you're walking into, right? Because it's easy to get it wrong.
I think also just having conversations similar to this one to try and make, some of the things that maybe design leaders are feeling, or myself being in recruitment is experiencing, and just talking out loud about it, I think sometimes can help, and trying to bring into the conversation other perspectives as well. Not getting stuck in a bit of an echo chamber just within design, I think, can be helpful. I don't know whether you feel the same way.
Yeah, I do. I write quite a lot about things that come up for me. And I'm usually, like, my default is critical, right? I'm just wired that way. I'm a Brit. So we're always complaining about something, but there's no false optimism here. But I think it's good to have a channel and talk about this stuff, because hopefully over time it will normalize some of the things that we see, and people start talking about the same things. And over time we do come together and we try to solve it. I think right now, because of AI, because of cuts, everyone's a little bit quiet. Everyone's a little bit nervous, doesn't want to put it up, doesn't want to cause unnecessary friction. But you have to ask yourself, is that going to help our craft?
That's true. I think maybe there's a bit of fear that comes with it. Like, because I don't think anything is really that black and white. Like, I think hearing your perspective on design leadership, how it can be, really influential, I think I agree with it. But I think there'll be different experiences that people have that match their context, that works for them, or like people come with different identities as well. So I think there's always going to be a bit of a spectrum, and it's I don't know that it's right or wrong. You may disagree with that, because my sense is that you've got a belief about, in order to push design forward, there is a better way to do it. I think there is a bit of a spectrum depending on where you are, but I think having conversations to understand each other a little bit more will be helpful in general to help the craft or the discipline kind of move along. That's just kind of my 2 cents.
And just to be supportive, like, everyone's going through the same thing. I'm not sure everyone's speaking about it as loudly as we should, but I think it's just a coping mechanism right now.
Yeah. And I love your writing about it. So if anyone's listening and hasn't deep dived into your pieces, they really should. What about if we shift a little bit? What are from a personal perspective, what were some of the things that you weren't prepared for when you stepped in to leadership roles? Was there anything that maybe you expected that didn't happen, or something that you just really weren't prepared for that surprised you about being a leader?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's situational as well, right? I think I've led teams at different times of my career, and it depends who's around you. I think we talked about it a little bit before. Sometimes it's being the best designer in the room, but maybe in a very, very junior environment or a decade ago, for example. But often it's like, what people don't tell you is you're trying to navigate the systems that don't naturally value what you bring. And that sounds a little bit critical, but it's kind of true. We talked about this, right? People don't necessarily understand. There isn't a clean definition for what design means. But on paper, you're accountable to shape quality and outcomes. But in reality, you don't fully control how those outcomes are made, right? It could be scope is the obvious one. Scope gets cut, or whether collaboration happens upstream, whether you inherit something, whether you're able to shape it. But no one prepares you for that. You come in thinking your job is to raise the quality of the work, build a strong team, and perhaps even evolve practices. But you quickly realize most of the impact is shaped by the decisions already happening outside of design. That's why I think it's so important for us to be proactive and move upstream.
It sounds, and I've experienced this speaking to different leaders, to address exactly that. I also think there's an element of, like, you've got to be quite tenacious and quite, what's the word I'm looking for? You've got to hang in there and, like, really, if you want to move the needle, like, you've got to go through a few rounds of pushing. And resilience. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. And I think it's maybe undersold that great leaders in design have to have that. Do you think it's built over time? Do you feel like over the course of your career you've built that, or were you like that to begin with?
I always jokingly say to my wife, there's probably a cockroach, and then Darren, I'm a little bit below in terms of resilience. Like, I've gone through a few difficult things in my life, and I think experiences shape you, not just work, other things in your life. But look, sometimes you get a great group of people around you as well, and you're hanging on for the ride as well. It's situational because you need those things to help you win. You look for the little wins, but ultimately, I don't think a design leader can walk into a role, be judged in 3 months. It's a 6 to 12 month timeline, right? Things change, they take time. As I said, you have to build the relationships with your tribe partners. I've just gone through that exercise. It took 3 months to build a shared philosophy and then build your bench. Again, hiring can take a little bit of time, and then try to get the small wins. Yeah, it's a bit of a long game, but you have to be patient and look for the tiny little wins, because sometimes it feels a little bit thankless.
Yeah. Do you feel that it's always a bit of, like, there will be periods of up and down in all the kind of different environments that you've been in? And I guess that question is coming from a space of, if there's a leader that's early in their career now and they're feeling like, God, this is an uphill battle. I feel quite lonely, like no one really gets it. Is that normal?
Yeah, I think it's normal. And the uncomfortable truth about design leadership is you're neither one thing or another, right? You think you're coming in. My view of design leadership is people practice strategy, right? Sorry, I'm off screen. People practice strategy. You barely get enough time to do strategy. You do it off the side of your desk because you're busy doing people and practice things. Or sometimes, you are shoved into work as well. So, but you kind of live in this weird space between your team and the business. And as a design leader or leader of leaders, which I was at Atlassian and Adobe, you kind of realize that you don't truly sit within a craft anymore. And your first team, my definition, and I've had different conversations with different people who align or don't align, my first team are my tribe. So that actually means that I'm neither fully attached to a PM group or an engineering group or design, but I'm somewhere in the middle, right? PMs generally hold the goals, engineering hold the keys to how. Design is kind of there we're always the junior partner in the room, and we don't necessarily hold the same goals or the same weight with decision making. But I agree that is my first team. Like, okay. I have to be aligned with those to the extent that sometimes my team disagree with me, but I'm, sure, design is my heart and it's my craft, but my first team as a leader is that tribe group. So being accountable to outcomes, being accountable to the trade-offs, having arguments about stuff, disagreeing, committing, try to influence at that level. That's the important layer that makes this work, doesn't work.
Do you think that leaders or designers that step into leadership, they're generally kind of prepared for that? Or do you feel in your experience, particularly having been a leader of leaders, do you think people are prepared to shift that mindset?
I think some people do amazing. Some people are just like swans, right? They just jump in and you're like, wow, can't believe this person's making this look so easy. But I think that other people come in with a preconception of what's required. I've done it, it's like, oh, I have to be dominant or I have to be a certain way. And then leadership styles come in and you learn them over time, right? I've worked in organizations where I have had to be autocratic, but at Atlassian, I learned I had to be democratic quite quickly because I had a very, very strong team around me and hired an amazing bench. And if I was in every decision and autocratic, that just wasn't going to work. So the type of people and the bench I built there, my job was to sit a little bit more abstract in the position and work on those relationships, work on the small wins. We were never going to change things overnight as a growth team, but over a year, we were able to dramatically change things because of the little wins that we were pushing through.
Do you think about 5 or 10 years from now, and if I narrow it down to your own personal experience, do you think your role will evolve, and how do you kind of envision that?
I'm going through a weird state at the moment where I'm doing a lot more IC work than my definition of IC work. Because remember, I've been leader of leaders, so I have been slightly more abstract. I'm more involved in the work now than I have been for a long time. And it's not just guiding, but it's how I'm using AI as well. And I think there's a decision point probably in the next couple of years, like, can AI really be cost effective? And I don't think anyone knows right now, right? Everyone's like super excited. Businesses are making fundamental people-led decisions based on the potential of AI. But let's do some simple math. 300 billion to make 5 doesn't work, right? I haven't got an MBA, but I can do that simple math. So at what point is that bubble going to burst? But there's an opposite argument to that. If that holds true and the ROI is there, our job is going to change, right? I think, as I said, design have to move upstream. Maybe we can get by with much leaner teams. Maybe we can bring in agents who are doing, it's something I'm exploring now with my CTO. Can we bring in certain workforce agents that are doing large areas of the lower D design for us, like building design systems based on specs? There's a potential that we can use Claude and concatenated agents to do these things for us, right into storybook, right into production. That would be amazing. But I still think you still need these core capabilities as a design team. So again, I think lowercase d will go away, but capital D will have to be that. The question will be, can it be done with much less? So one example is how I'm using Claude Cowork right now. I'm able to concatenate together multiple other Claude projects or helpers or prompt compilers or heuristic evaluations, connect to Figma MCP, come up with rough wireframes, create strategy, even thinking about writing design career axes, right? If anyone's worked in a large design organization, these things take months. With Claude or any AI supported tools, you can do these things in hours now. It's
for
fine.
sure.
Yeah. But is this going to be the new normal? Is it cost effective? I think everyone's waiting to see.
I do feel that as well, that we're in a bit of a flux and people are experimenting. How do you manage your team's experience in that? Because obviously, if we imagine a world where the teams get leaner or certain aspects of a role can be handed off to technology, there's obviously going to be an anxiety. And it's a big question, but it's probably one that I experience the most when I'm speaking to designers right now. How are you managing from a people perspective, helping the team experiment and helping them see that, things in the future might change, but also kind of easing that anxiety about their role and maybe who they are as a designer?
Yeah, it's a really interesting position to be in. I think my role was the conduit between things, right? Because I'm working with my tribe partners, I'm working with my CTO, and then I'm working with the team and across with other like lateral crafts. So I'm seeing the opportunity to grow capability in our teams, doing things like, showing ways and bringing the team along in trying new things to do their craft faster, right? I think sometimes design's biggest failure is that we don't create enough space for it to do things well. So game plans, for example, is a really good thing. So how can we use agents to help us translate an early spec into what a design game plan could be so that we can influence earlier? That's one very tangible example we've been doing, where if design have been in the volume game where they're just accepting PRDs and doing quite shallow work, taking that approach helps us understand what we could be doing, and then we can lean in and intercept. So my team are actually getting more enjoyment from doing things like that. Also showing the value to, I guess, better outcomes. Again, I've created a heuristic evaluation agent where to do a heuristic evaluation of an experience could take a week for one flow, right? We were able to do it on a big project that really showed that we were critical to the outcomes of this, and we were able to do 12 flows in maybe a couple of hours. It's incredible, right? So the team have really got excited about how we could use agents to help us move things faster. So creating game plans, using heuristic evaluations, using synthetic users to do testing, to improve the quality of the work, to make iterations before we go to engineering, avoiding rework. I think one of the biggest issues I'm seeing in the confusion, though, is because we've been resource constrained at the moment, we have a concept of full-time work and office hours. And I still think that education and understanding part of design isn't there, where people are like, well, it just needs, I've done this in Claude Design or Figma Make. It just needs to go back into the design system now. And then we start looking at it with that point of view and realize that actually system decisions haven't been made. And I think that's the space where design really needs to show. Like, it's not just translating something verbatim from a vibe coded prototype, but we have to be able to show, like, actually, you guys haven't solved this whole problem and here's why, right? And that's where I think that's where we earn our crust still.
Definitely. And I think full circle all the way back to what you said at the beginning, that's that big D, isn't it? To be
100%.
able, to show that. Darren, I could keep talking to you, I think, for hours, but I'm just keeping an eye on the time there. But I do, as I said, like I've been someone that has read a lot of the content that you've put out, and it's really helpful for me. Tell people where they can find some of your stuff.
Where is it? I'm on Medium, and you can usually find me on LinkedIn as well. I think it's Medium D Smith Design Leadership.
Everyone check it out. I love the stuff that you're putting out there. And unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up the conversation there, but I've so appreciated your time, your kind of insights and experience. I think it's really unique. And I think a lot of people, whether they're deep into their leadership career or someone that's thinking about stepping into that space, I think they'll get a lot of insight from what you've said and what you write about. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm always happy to chat to people. So if someone found this interesting or see me at an event, come and say hi. I love talking about what I do. I'm passionate. You'll see me wave my arms around and get excited. So it's a good time.
Amazing. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Nicole.
That's it for today's episode of Behind the Teams. If you found value in today's episode, the best way to support the show is to share it with one other leader who is currently building a team. For more insights on the intersection of product, design, psychology, the future of work, let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm Nicole Howe, and this is Behind the Teams. Thanks for listening.